Welcome to the dark side of therapy. Tonight's an especially interesting night because I got a man here that's going to be vulnerable with me, and y'all know how I like to be vulnerable. And Andrew Douglas is a guy that's a former paramedic firefighter. If I get any of this wrong, tell me. And has actually decided in this field there may be some problems with, I don't know, not opening up, not being vulnerable. And he's on a quest to end this and I think make these conversations more appropriate, including developing this really awesome app. So it's so good to have you here tonight. Did I get any of those details wrong?
You are perfect. Nice work.
Okay, awesome. So I want to start with, to me, this sounds like a very difficult job that you used to do. And I can't imagine doing it. I just picture adrenaline and just a lot of energy and seeing a lot of very, very scary stuff. Now, if all that is true, it makes sense to me why we don't talk about it very much, or at least in this culture, we don't talk about it very much. But when you were a part of that culture, was there a part of you that ever thought, man, I would love to make this safe, but I get this resistance and it's very hard to make these conversations safe?
You know, that's a great question. I would say in the beginning of my career, it was never a thought. Okay. Just a little backstory, right? So I started out as a volunteer in '05. And when I started out, I was told right away to shut up and listen, and your feelings don't matter, right? So this is the culture I came into, right? And that's not everywhere in the fire service, right? But that's kind of like how I started my career. And these are people I'm looking up to as a young, impressionable 18-year-old, right?
Right.
And so as my career progressed, right, and I get hired and I go to paramedic school, even in paramedic school, we didn't talk about these kind of things. Like this conversation wouldn't be happening, right? It was all kind of one of those things you just got to deal with it on your own. And then as the years have progressed, throughout my career, there's been a lot of progress within the mental health community, in the fire service specifically, and law enforcement and EMS as well. That like, okay, I think we need to start talking about our problems, right? So I would say over like the last like 3 years, I definitely started to think like, why we have all these like after actions after fires, right? You know, we sit around and talk about what went good, what we didn't do good, what could we do better. Why aren't we doing the same thing on these critical calls? And not necessarily we utilize like critical incident stress debriefings, but it's not effective, right? Like because you're getting a bunch of people together that don't already feel comfortable talking about their problems, but at the same time, if we could do it at a small level, like with our crews, you know, that's how we can start making an impact. And towards the end of my career, in the last year, you know, I was very open. The last couple of years, I was very open with my struggles, being, you know, obviously a union leader, trying to make that change. And then as a, you know, just as a person, human being, and a partner, you know, we started talking about it more. It's just not there yet, Eric. We really need to step up and be better. But yeah, no, I would definitely say it was not something in the beginning that was talked about at all. And times are changing, but we still have a long way to go.
Okay, you just mentioned a term for the meetings you had. I like the technical term. What was that called again?
The critical incident stress debrief.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So here's why I'm laughing. Because I hear a term like that and I think, boy, have you taken out the vulnerability and the humanity of it, because it sounds so technical to me. I don't know. Is that the right impression?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like super technical, right? But like, so you know, I can think of a kid incident we had, right? And like we had the dispatchers in there, we had the police that were there in there, we had the paramedics and the firefighters. That's great, right? We're trying to do something positive and try not to impact our people. And at the same time, I don't know these dispatchers that are in there. I don't know these police officers. Some of the police officers I do, but I don't know everybody. So I don't feel comfortable opening up in front of a huge group of people and saying, you know, I'm really affected by this call. Like it really bothers me. So it's just one of those things. I just don't think it's the most effective way. I think it's trying to do something good, right? I just don't know if that's the most effective way of doing it.
Let's have a little fun. Why are men so hard? Why are men so hard with these issues? I want you to tell me, why is it so hard?
It's how we're trained, right? It's from a young age we're taught that we need to be these tough, um, emotionalist people, right? I mean, I can't speak for everybody, right? But I can speak for
Right.
my own father and my upbringing, right? In that he never expressed his feelings or emotions with me. And come to find out, he had been struggling from childhood trauma, for years, right? And I didn't know this my entire life. And now looking back, it makes sense why my dad didn't interact with me, why my dad didn't was not very social, or would, be quick to anger on things, because I saw a lot of that in myself later on in the progression of my PTSD, right?
Right.
And I just think we're kind of indoctrinated into being this like rigid individual, right? And when in reality, like, I think, if you want to talk about tough, like, facing your shit, excuse my language,
No,
it's
say
not going
it.
to be the last time.
Hmm.
If
Hmm.
you're not able to face that, right, you're actually weak,
Hmm.
right? what
Right.
what takes strength is to like hit this head on and say, okay, this is going to hurt going through it, but
Absolutely.
I need to get better for myself and for my family and for my coworkers. And it's just, it's a really it's going to be a hard nut to crack. I think, for me, I've started with my child of especially my son, of talking about my emotions and my feelings and explaining, like,
So
not,
great.
I don't know, like a week ago, I was like, hey, I'm sorry, but I've not really been interacting as much. I've been kind of feeling a little bit sad, from some work related stuff. And I love you. I just want you to know I love you. And that's why I'm acting that way. And so I try to teach him to use his feelings and express himself, because I'm hoping to be that chain breaker, I guess you could say, within my family's lineage,
That's awesome.
and make a difference in hopefully in his life when he grows up, and he won't have these same challenges I have.
I'm glowing as you say that because I think that's what young men need. And unfortunately,
100%.
I think you definitely are the exception and not the rule. But even us sitting here talking about this, some male is going to watch this, and even if we tonight can make it okay for them, that's awesome. Because look, you had a tough guy job. I mean, that's how I perceive it. I have a job where I sit and talk to people about their feelings. Most people don't look at what I do and say that's pretty masculine. But when I think about what you do, I think that is a masculine profession, no feelings allowed. And I think for you to have found a way to sort of rectify all this and still retain your manliness, yeah, I think it's awesome. And to show your son that it's okay to feel, I think that's so important because young men are not acculturated to feel. We both know that. And they're certainly not acculturated to feel feminine. That's a huge no no. So I think what you've done is very courageous.
Thank you very much. And I don't want you to downplay your job either, right? Like,
Well,
you
yeah,
have a very hard job as well, and you have to deal with a lot of traumatic stuff as well through
it's
your
true.
job, right? So don't downplay your job, but I think it's going to take each and every one of us to step up, right? And make the change. Like, change doesn't happen by somebody else doing it. Change happens
Right.
in yourself. So, really, I think hopefully some of your viewers tonight can get something from this. And that's my goal, right? Like, if I can reach one life and impact somebody, like, I've done my job, right? If I impact
Absolutely.
two, great. But, if we can make a difference on one person and turn their life around so they can have a healthy career or healthy family life, whatever it is my hope in all this.
So I want to know, at your core, what is the catalyst that got you to this place of passion where you've really made this, it sounds to me like a life goal here. I'm going to bring this stuff out and we're not going to hide from it. What is the catalyst that got you here, Andrew?
Well, that's a good question. There's, I mean, there's so many different factors, right? I think for me, like, speaking for me, I I really I really had to like go through like the bad stuff, right? And I went just so deep into darkness that I had no hope. I had no future. I wanted to kill myself, right? And
Hmm. Hmm.
for me, like, I would say the catalyst for me would be Probably in Christmas Eve 2021, right? My father and I, we haven't really delved too deep into that, but we growing up, we had this horrible relationship, right? And I always wanted that father figure, and I found that in the fire service, right? So I was able to find my family that I wanted, even though like my relationship with my mother was great and I loved my mom. I never had that like father figure in my life that I was like desiring and like seeking that approval. And I got that through the fire service, right? And for me, that was like a very, it held me back a lot. That held me back from getting help, right? But in on Christmas Eve, and I don't like to talk about my spirituality and my religious beliefs much because I feel I'm supportive of everybody. I think
Sure.
everybody should have faith in something other than themselves, whatever that is. If
Hmm.
it's Christianity, if you feel like Judaism is your whatever you feel, Buddhism, whatever it is. I've really found a lot of help in Buddhism myself, right? Um,
Sure.
and I got to pick from everything, right? So I never was one to like pray, right? And um, before sorry, my kid
No,
was
you're
trying
fine.
to come in. Before Christmas, I like never ever prayed, right? And I'm like, God or whoever's out there, I will do whatever it takes to get better and get
Mhm.
healthy for me and my family, right? And then like the next day, I have this like breakthrough moment with my dad, right? Like at night, like kids went to bed and like getting Christmas presents out for him and stuff, and he opened up to me, and that meant a lot, right? Like at that point in my recovery, I'd already radically accepted, as we called it, where I went
Mhm.
to a treatment facility at that, like, I'm not going to get that relationship that I desire. Like, it's just
Right.
not going to happen at
Right.
this point,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
But he was very vulnerable with me, and told me about his struggles through trauma as a child and what he went through with his father. Sorry, lighting got bad there. Sun's going down in Costa Rica.
I know. I hear you. 70 degrees out here today, so I'm thrilled.
Oh, that's about 80 right now. It's not too bad.
Nice.
Um, so yeah, so we
Yeah.
had this like really vulnerable moment together, and like I learned about his story and what he went through that I never had known, right? And so like that was kind of like a catalyst for me of like, okay, this is obviously something like, yeah, I have all my traumas, but am I maybe less resilient because of my upbringing as a child? I don't know, maybe.
Right. Right.
Um, but I need to make a change in my life. So I that night, my dad he told me because I had been I was contemplating retiring right from the fire service at this point and walking away. And he said, "Well, you need to write tonight. You need to write three goals for the future down." And so I wrote three things down. I have it in my phone and I look at it frequently. And the number one thing was my number one job every day is to be a good dad. And that is everything, right? Like I want to raise my children differently than I was raised as a child.
Yes.
And so to do that, I got to be a good dad every day. It's going to come with a lot of failure, which is fine, right? We learn from
Yep.
failure and we're not
Yes, we
perfect.
do. Right.
And I'm not afraid of failure. Obviously, I'm doing a startup. And then the second thing was to change the world. And I I've had ever since I can remember, I've had this like inner drive to like give back to my community and to I guess you could maybe call it, it's probably trauma related, but like
Hmm.
self-sacrifice.
Sure.
Like I believe in the greater good of humanity and whatever I can do to impact somebody's life, no matter who they are or what walk of life they are. So I wanted to make sure that I like, kept that in my goals, that I continued doing that. I can still continue to give back and change a life in just a different way, right? And then the last thing, and I think this is really impactful, is, and I think all your viewers should think about this, is what are your core values? Like
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, in every decision you make, what values do you have as a human being? And for me, I came up with four, and I made it so I could always remember it. It's the acronym's CAF, right? So
Calf.
compassion, accountability, loyalty, and family. So that for me was like this impactful moment of like, okay, I'm about to walk away from something that is, we call it the golden handcuffs in the fire service, at least in my state, because I made a ton of money. I made very good money for what I
Sure.
did.
Sure.
had amazing benefits, and now I'm walking away and getting a $2,400 a month, healthcare bill, and I can't even afford that
Right.
on
Right.
my little pension that I got from walking away, right? So that was, I would definitely say, is like the defining moment. Obviously there was a lot leading up to that, but that would be like a defining moment of like, no, I got to make a change. And then this, over the last like year and a half or so, like I've I don't know. I guess I found who I am as a person, and
Yeah. Yeah.
now I'm trying to shoot for the stars. So yeah,
Um, that was probably as honest a response as I've ever gotten from anybody I've ever sat with. And that's very refreshing to me because I can tell you're a guy that really isn't worried about presentation right now. You want your story to ring true and honest, so you're going to tell it exactly the way you see it, and I appreciate that. And I do see the vulnerability in you tonight, and I appreciate. Well, I saw it when we first met too, but tonight it's even better because vulnerability is about purpose, and so thank you for modeling for people, not just men, this kind of vulnerability. And I want to say too, I love that your dad did this because in therapy world, I have so many clients who are dying for their parents to do just this kind of thing because I think it can be so healing. And parents typically don't give us what we want, but for him to give you that gift of healing, I think that's just wonderful. And that did partially change the course of your life, I'm hearing.
yeah, for sure. It impacted me greatly. And just real brief on what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about being raw and vulnerable. And like one
We
thing
are.
with me, like I've been very good at like identifying my feelings within my body, because if you can identify the feelings in your body first, you can stop getting into these moments of and but what I'm trying to get at is by you telling me, I feel very uncomfortable when I get compliments, right?
Mm-hmm.
We,
Yep.
I think about like this call I went on with my good friend, best friend Johnny, who's my partner for years, my neighbor too. I even lived in his basement for a long time while we were building our house. And
Mm-hmm.
and so when I went back not too long ago, he goes, one thing I remember about you that I will always remember is that we went to this cardiac arrest call, and it was a mom in her 30s, and she had two kids that were sitting in there watching TV, and they were home alone. And when I walked in the door, I looked over at her and I go, she's dead. And I started taking care of these kids immediately. And when he said that to me, of like how much impact that made on him, and like,
Mm-hmm.
I turned to the actual patients who are now these kids, even though they're not sick or injured. Like it's
Right.
so hard to hear things like that for me. And I can like feel it in my chest right now by you like making me that compliment, that like it makes me uncomfortable,
Yep.
and I'm still having to work through that. So, feeling your body is like a very important thing through recovery of any kind of trauma or depression, anything like that.
So let me tell you something you already know, Andrew. Traumatized people don't like compliments. Yeah.
That's me.
Yep. I don't think I've met a person yet that sustained trauma that because you know what happens with trauma is shame. I mean, shame goes right along with trauma, doesn't it? And
I had a very, very sick shame voice in my head
yeah.
for years. I still do kind of, but not as bad as I used to.
So when I just complimented you, it was not easy. Okay, you've acknowledged that. It did not feel maybe good in your body, but you know what? You still sat there. So I think that's awesome. And I'm sorry, I compliment people. I can't help it.
Well, thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
need to be better at feeling it and
Well,
accepting it.
look, if we can work out that skill together tonight, that's great. But I'm not doing it to be cute. I'm doing it because I genuinely appreciate it, and that goes back to my upbringing, which is you better tell people when you appreciate them, and so I do.
Well, thank you. That's
You're
awesome.
welcome.
That's a
Absolutely,
good skill to
absolutely.
have.
Let me ask a tough question, and you can set me straight. But I'm going to guess in the line of work you were in, trauma was very, very common. I mean, real trauma to the extent we're seeing dead people, literally, and we're seeing things that are probably unimaginable. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, early on in my career, I worked for like a more rural, slower department, and the frequency was not as common.
Mm-hmm.
But I was definitely involved in some pretty horrific things that, like, I I don't think it's even worth talking about to viewers because
Yeah,
it is very traumatic.
sure.
Um, and then as I transferred stations and became in a busier department, that frequency became more and more frequent. And I also had like a bad stigma, right? Like about me, like guys are like, oh, the black cloud. Like I would just get some crazy shit. And like, yeah, I mean, like I was involved in like a train wreck on I-5 in south of Seattle by in between Tacoma and Olympia. And like
Yep.
that stuff just doesn't happen every day, right? And so I just had all these like crazy calls or I mean, I don't know how many people I saved in a bathroom, like in the smallest bathrooms ever, right? Like there's nothing worse than working a code. And code meaning, for your viewers who don't know what I'm talking about, cardiac arrest in a bathroom,
Yeah.
right?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
had super bad luck, and you see so many things, and it's not necessarily the traumatic things always that get you the most, right? It's like those two kids that I was just talking about, right?
Right.
Or the suffering that you see, especially in the well, both in the rural and urban environments. But I mean, I don't know how many houses I went into where kids had literally a bed in their room and that was it, and no food in the house, and we would go buy them food. Like we live in America, and like seeing all the suffering constantly, I think
Yeah.
that really weighs on a lot of our providers as well. Is that we see all this suffering and nobody does anything to fix it, and
Wow.
that's really hard to swallow.
I didn't even think about that. I didn't even
Yeah,
think about that.
that's impactful shit, man. That hurts worse than anything, I think.
I could say that when I was an in-home mental health person, I would go to people's homes, and I know exactly what you mean, because there is a certain quality of, you just know the air is not healthy because there's
Yeah,
cat crap everywhere and there's not a single surface that's not sticky. But you
I can
realize that
smell
that's,
that right now. By the way, that
can
smell
you?
never
Yeah.
leaves.
Oh, I've been to some houses in summer, but it's that same exact thing. And I hadn't even thought about that till you brought it up. That's traumatic too, because you realize people live like this. And
Mm-hmm.
that goes so largely unnoticed. I think because that's a basic need. I think having a clean house and a clean place to be, and we don't necessarily think about that as traumatic either to the person living there, or the person going into that environment. But you can be unprepared and see some really bad shit. You're right.
Yeah, and it was really hard for me because I really struggled towards the end because I grew up in a very privileged life, and I was given everything I wanted. My folks had plenty of money, right, and I never really had to work for anything until I got into the fire service, right, and I had to make that on my own, and so to like see all this suffering like around me and like how like ungrateful I was
Mm.
in my upbringing, like that's really like changed how I view life and how I try to teach my kids because um we lived in a very wealthy community
Mm-hmm.
where I was outside of where I was a firefighter at. You drive across the bridge and there's just so many people suffering, and people just drive right by it and don't care. And they say they care, but what action are they doing, right? And so
Yeah.
that was a huge struggle towards the end for me as well.
Just watching the suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And life's all about suffering in general, right? Like don't get me wrong, like but when it comes to people's basic needs of survival and seeing them those not met, it's really hard, you know, really hard, especially kids.
I totally agree. And I didn't think we would talk about this necessarily tonight, but I'm glad you brought it up because once again, I see the vulnerability and passion in you for this issue. And I have the same thing because I hate to watch people suffer. And I feel like I've had a pretty privileged life too. Whenever I start getting down on myself, I have to look around and say, yeah, you got it pretty good. When I was out in Portland, Oregon, near your stomping grounds in Seattle, the homeless population out there obviously has exploded. And it really took me by surprise. I hadn't been there in a few years. And you realize this is how people live. And not a lot is being done, I think, for homelessness across the country. And it's profoundly, a bad problem, and people are suffering. But again, I think it escapes our consciousness. We want it out of sight, out of mind. So as you're saying all this, yeah, it resonates with me.
Yeah, I mean, well, you want my opinion? You want to solve homelessness? Fix childhood trauma. Childhood trauma will fix alcohol and drug addiction. And once you fix alcohol and drug addiction, you can get people healthy, you know, because I think about like you know, as a paramedic, I had to like gain people's trust within 30 seconds, right? When I walk in, I have to gain that person's trust, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I have to be vulnerable with them, and they need to be vulnerable with me. And through that, like I had a lot of great conversations in the back of the ambulance with a lot of homeless people. And there are some people out there that are just not good people, right? I would say the majority of people I met, and being able to like talk about my trauma and stuff too, when we're breaking down like when they're suicidal or stuff like that,
Right.
it comes down to childhood trauma, number one, and drug and alcohol problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that is
I,
literally hand in hand. So, but hey, what do I know? I'm just a firefighter, so nobody's gonna listen to me. But
well,
we'll see.
I will. I'll listen to you because I think you're saying truth, but it's an
Yeah,
ugly
I
truth,
see it on the streets, man.
absolutely. We do have a trauma problem, but we specifically have a trauma problem in certain portions of the population, and I think too, and this is just my opinion, but if we made it okay for people to say, and I will pick on the men here, it's okay that I'm traumatized, it's okay that I'm scared, it's okay that I'm frightened every day of my life. I think if we give permission to people, that would also be healing. That's just my opinion, but take it for what it's worth.
No, I think that's a great opinion for sure. I agree with you.
Yeah. See, in my field, it's different. I work in a field where I think probably for every one male therapist, there's probably 300 female therapists. So a lot of my friends are female, and I have no problem sharing my feelings because there's very little chance they're going to say, yeah, you big wimp. But if I worked in a male-dominated field, I sometimes wonder how I would approach it. Would I go about it in a way where I don't share myself and don't make myself vulnerable? I just think about that. And I'm going to stay in this profession, so I may never know. But I do wonder how different I might behave if I was in, say, a field like yours or the field that you were in.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, right? I do kind of regret though. I do have a little regret of
Mm-hmm.
not being more vulnerable.
Yeah.
I think some of the most biggest changes in my life when it comes to relationship, when it comes to friendships, is comes around vulnerability. All my old friends, I was never vulnerable with. They had no clue I had a problem for the longest time because I was able to put this facade on that I'm happy and had to play this role right for years.
Right.
And I
Right.
think a lot of men in the fire service and women do the same thing. And when I made that change, telling myself like this is okay, like you need to feel comfortable who you're vulnerable with, right? I'm not saying you need to just go around telling everybody your problems, but now with my friends that I've built down here in Costa Rica, like I'm very honest about what I've been through and my struggles, and I feel comfortable to tell them when I'm having a bad day. In fact, that's literally how my app idea came about, was having a bad day and being vulnerable with my friends, saying, "Dude, I'm having a shitty day. I feel really sad right now," and just having that friend there, like that true connection. And I think vulnerability for me has brought true connection, which I think a lot of us lack in society.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't have said it better myself, which is why I'm glad we've connected because again, it's a start. Yeah, and I think every start is wonderful. I want to ask about your app. Tell the audience what your app does and what it means to you.
Yeah, so like I said, I was having a shitty day, and I'm like, and just brief background, like after leaving the fire service, like I'm blessed to get retraining through great legislation that was passed by the Washington State Council of Firefighters that allows us to leave the fire service and find a new career field. So for me, that's tech. So I've been teaching myself to code, and as I wait to get into school,
Okay.
and so my friends down here are pretty much all in tech as well, that they can work remotely, right? From they work in the States or Canada. And so I tell my buddy, I'm like, dude, I wish I could just build this app that like I type in how I feel and then like the page catches on fire and it disappears, right?
Mm.
And so that got him like sparked, like, dude, I think you're onto something. I'm like, what do you mean I'm onto something? And that his background is 20 years in the tech industry, and
Okay.
he specializes in data science. He's a project manager for that in a big software company, and his people do artificial intelligence, machine learning stuff. And so that got him thinking, like, because we had talked about before about how it's so difficult for me to, now it's not, but it
Right.
was before, expressing my feelings verbally. But I was very good at writing about how I felt. So that got him thinking of like, okay, what kind of gainful information can people get by typing how they feel? And so utilizing the great, good and bad technology of AI, there's pluses and minuses with all technology, right?
Right.
But what our app will do is, so you can basically type how you're feeling,
Hmm.
and it will be able to detect the topic that you're talking about.
Okay.
It'll detect the emotions and feelings that you have, which is crazy, by the way. We've been
It's
messing around with our model, and I typed some very vague things that you'd be like, I wonder if it's going to catch this, and it did. It was freaky.
wow.
And also, it will connect people to show them how many other users within that community are experiencing the same thing.
Okay.
And because our slogan is share, connect, and heal.
Okay.
And by sharing our feelings and connecting with others, which we kind of talked about connection a little bit ago,
Right.
we feel that's like a first step for that person who's not comfortable talking about their problems, to talk about their problems, and then ultimately connect them to care is our long-term vision. So yeah, I'm really excited. The company is called Siento. The app's going to be called Siento, which is a Spanish word that means to feel.
Okay.
And so we felt that was really representative of what we're trying to build. And so yeah, we just started development, and we have basically a team of all volunteers that have joined us. I mean, obviously they're going to be working, not working for free. They're getting equity, but they're not taking money up front because they believe in our mission and the vision, long-term vision of our company that we're building. And yeah, I mean, the sky's the limit, but we really need beta testers. So if any of your viewers are interested, it's not limited just to first responders.
Yeah.
Please check us out. We got a website. So
And I'll talk to some peers too, Andrew. Just let them know there's this new app, and because it sounds awesome. So this, if I'm hearing you right, you can get on there, talk about your emotions. It's going to put you in touch with other people with similar emotions, and this can be a starting point before maybe you get a stronger intervention. Do I have that right?
exactly. Yeah. And
Okay.
I don't
All
want to
right.
get too deep in the weeds, right? Of like my huge future vision.
Go
I
for it.
I'm a pretty disruptive person, right? Like
Yeah.
you can so a funny story real quick before I get in that. So
Please.
when I was in the union, we were doing contract negotiations, and we were killing this contract, right? And in the final thing, like in the very beginning, our very first ask in negotiations was we wanted polos to wear on shift.
Hmm.
And we got shut down instantaneously. And I'm like, wait, why not? And they gave me some bullshit reason. And so, like, in the back of my head, I'm like, I'm going to be disruptive. So the
Yeah.
very last ask we had, we were ready to sign. And I'm like, listen, chief, we can't sign this until you give us polos. And he's like, are you fucking kidding me? And I'm like, yes. He's like, you're going to do this over polos? And I'm like, you didn't give me a good enough reason, chief. We want polos. And
Wow.
that was the longest caucus we had, which a caucus is like a break in negotiations over
Right.
freaking polo, which I'm proud to say they're still wearing at my department.
It's all about the
Um,
shirt. It's all about the shirts, Andrew, isn't
it
it?
is. I mean, I'm passionate about polos. I'm
Yeah.
passionate, even though I'm not wearing one right now. I'm
You
passionate
know
about them.
what? I
Yeah,
totally
so
believe you.
I'm all about being disruptive. So I think that there's a lot of great solutions out there, right? And connecting people to care. But what we found through our market research when we were starting to look into this, like, is this even a viable idea? What less than 20% of people, and this is 138-ish now responses, it keeps trickling in over the last month.
Okay.
Less than 20% are happy with their mental health resources at their employer.
Wow.
Less than 20. Like,
Yeah.
that's a significant, that tells you that the services that are being offered are not working.
Yep.
And so we've through that research have come up with some future ideas that I won't talk about yet. Maybe I can come on again. I'd love to.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And talk about like our future plans once that's all set in stone. But yeah, I'm pretty excited for the future of Ciento, and we have a really great team, and I've made sure to like hand pick everybody that like they're passionate about. We're truly trying to solve a problem instead of just trying to make a buck like some of these companies out there that offer solutions that are complete money grabs, right?
Yeah.
I'm really excited.
I could lament on that too, but I'll save you that rant tonight. I would love to be a beta tester. Can I be one too?
Yeah, you should go to www.siento.ai, and you'll see the join beta link. Just hit that. You can peruse on the website, see what we're also offering. It has some screenshots as well.
I believe I saw that invite on your website because I went there briefly. So I will do that because I would love to check it out and kind of play around with it. I think it's so great that you're doing this. And what I love about mental health is entry points that are less frightening than just going into a clinic for the first time, which is very frightening for a lot of people. I like that you're creating sort of a safer, gentler way to at least get in. And I think this is brilliant. And no, I think there are some apps out there that aren't very helpful, but there's always diamonds in the rough too. And when you talk about people being dissatisfied with the resources of mental health, yeah, that's a huge problem. And I hope to solve that, maybe not in my lifetime, but it needs to be solved because we need to take it seriously. And a lot of places don't. Even in my field, Andrew, we don't take mental health very seriously. And I have a problem with that because if you're not healthy at your job, you can't work with unhealthy people. You need to be at your healthiest. So yeah, that's where the passion in me comes out.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I'd love your support and your viewers' support as well.
Absolutely.
We'll be launching the beta in May. So May is Mental Health Awareness Month, right? And
Yep.
We've kind of picked that out as a deadline to like get this thing out there. Obviously, it's not going to be in the App Store. You have to like sign up through our website because ultimately, like we're not trying to build what we think is going to solve a problem. We're building a basic solution that we need your help to impact other people's lives, right? We need your feedback to drive this forward and truly build something that will make a difference. And that's our end goal, right? Is to make a difference in the world some way. Like I said, I want to change the world.
I do too. And my dream, like you, is to affect as many people as I can. But if I can only get one, that's fine. And really my goal too is to get the young clinicians, the young therapists who are burning out at such a high rate. I just want to help them get into the field and not burn out. And so again, conversations like this, I think, maybe not directly affecting them, but they do affect them because I'm talking to a success story with somebody that actually said, there's something I need to address here. And very few people, again, I think, do that, especially young people. I think they have this resilience that's going to carry them through anything, and that's not the right way to look at it. So if nothing else, another great conversation. It's been so genuine tonight, Andrew, and I just thank you so much for that, because I don't always get that with people. And tonight, I didn't have to think much about what you said. My guest last week, Deb, same thing, so authentic. And when somebody's honest, you don't have to think. It's self-evident that they care or what they're propagating. And so tonight was like that. So I just want to say thank you again so much for your honesty and sharing with the audience your story and the vulnerability. I'll say it one final time. It's awesome.
It's a great word. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be on here and speak to you and your guests. And, I like to end this in anything I say nowadays with whether it be a podcast or we're talking with other brothers and sisters in fire services that, I'm not perfect. I fail all the time. I have stumbles. I fall backwards. Yeah. But I can tell your guests and your viewers that there's hope, right? There is hope to get better. You need to have, and this is another piece of advice I'll give that I just got the other day. A guy told me after a podcast, he goes, "You need to forgive yourself." So there's two pieces of advice I give your viewers. Number one, have hope that you're going to get better because you need to have faith that it's possible because it is. Look at me. I mean, I have happy family and we have our issues, but I've turned my
Absolutely.
life around.
Right.
And that you need to forgive yourself. I've harbored a lot of guilt from the negative things I've done to my family, my friends. Even as an employee, I was not the best employee towards the end of my career, right? And I harbored a lot of guilt from that. And when he said that to me the other day, it was like I had to like sit there and just think about it. I'm like, wow, I do need to forgive myself. So I'm still working on that one, but think about that, folks. Just think about that. That's what I'll end it on. So thank you so much for having me on.
Andrew
Been a
Douglas,
pleasure.
it's been a pleasure, and yeah, I would love to do it again. And let's definitely keep in touch. It's been very, very meaningful for me tonight. So this has been the Dark Side of Therapy. Andrew Douglas is our guest. If you like this episode, please hit like, please subscribe, and again, thank you so much for being part of this. Good night.